good morning, and welcome to the Real Estate Chicas Talk Show. I am Jen Olmsted. I am the owner of Olmsted Real Estate Group, and with me today,
it's Ana Montemayor. I'm part of the Olmsted Real Estate Group. And bienvenidos, gracias por acompañarnos. El día de hoy vamos a hablar acerca de el abogado en tu transacción de bienes raíces. So, hi everyone.
she is back from Mexico, so
She's
back in the cold weather stateside, and we're so happy to have her back. And with us, we have a special guest today. We have Dan Glasser. He is a real estate attorney. And Dan, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, thanks for having me, Jen. So as you mentioned, I'm a real estate attorney and partner with the Herzog Law Firm. I've been doing real estate law for about 18 years. And I live in Clifton Park and also have 6 children.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's a lot.
Yep. Yeah, he has 6 kids. That's like one of my favorite facts about you is that you have 6 kids and a love for Taylor Swift.
I do.
So today we want to talk about the importance of having a real estate attorney, especially on the buying side. A lot of people will ask me, do I need a real estate attorney? What do they do for me? And I think it's really important to understand that having a real estate attorney is crucial in the home buying process. So, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what a real estate attorney does for a buyer? You can even touch on a seller as well.
Oh, absolutely. So a real estate attorney is going to guide a buyer or seller from the time that the contract is signed all the way to the closing. They are very familiar with the documents that are signed at the closing, for example, a mortgage, a note, and all these related documents, and also documents related to title. What is title insurance? What is a title search? And it's funny you mentioned, why do I need a real estate attorney? And what struck me is, sometimes people will use just any attorney to represent them in a purchase of a home, which is not a great idea. To illustrate the point, I ask clients, look, if you needed brain surgery, and you're in that unfortunate position, would you see a neurosurgeon or would you see a podiatrist? Now, both of them are doctors. They're very smart. One of them is going to screw it up. So, along that line, yes, your best friend might be an attorney, but they do matrimonial law. That's not someone you want representing you when you're buying or selling a house. And, if somebody asks me to represent them in a criminal proceeding or a divorce proceeding, the answer is no, because you're going to lose, because I don't do that kind of law.
Right.
So that's why I focus on real estate law. So if you are buying or selling a home, very important to use a local real estate attorney.
In what part of the process do we contact?
So, I've got clients that when they are searching for a house, they reach out to me. They may have questions about the process. I love that. I love answering questions. Most of the time, I get involved with the process right after the contract is signed. So I'd get a copy from either the agent or the client. And then we have this attorney review period. So we have usually 3 days to go through the contract, and I can answer any questions that they may have and explain things they should be doing and things they should not be doing.
Right. So what can go wrong, let's say, during the process? What can go wrong? If you have any examples.
So, if a buyer client, let's say they lose their job, they may no longer qualify for the financing. Things to never, ever do when buying a house. After you sign the contract, now is not the greatest time to buy a new car.
Right.
And also, don't go to the furniture store and spend $10,000 furnishing your new home, despite the ads that might say, buy now, no interest until 2030. Because even though you might not have to make any payments, for 8 years, it's still going to affect your credit.
Right.
And if the bank gets wind of that, and they will, because they're going to run your credit the day before or the day of the closing, they'll see that pop up and you may no longer qualify. And the house you thought you were going to close on is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I have an important thing to note too. So some people, they have some confusion because when they apply for a mortgage, they see on their closing statement that there is a fee for an attorney for the bank. So people will ask me, if I already have an attorney who's representing the bank side, why do I need an attorney to represent me as well? I'm paying 2 fees. So Dan, maybe you can explain why a buyer pays for an attorney for themselves and then also pays for the mortgage end of that.
Right. So as part of the process of getting a mortgage, you pay bank fees. One of those fees is you pay the bank attorney. The bank attorney is there to protect the interest of the bank, not you. So it's important to get your own attorney. Now, granted, there are attorneys out there that represent the buyer and the lender in the same transaction. If there's a conflict, though, they're going to have to step away from either you or the bank. Generally, they're going to step away from you. But I mean, I always recommend, have your own attorney. They're looking out for you. And like I said, they're there to guide you from start to finish and make sure that you're protected.
How do you handle the objection that people feel they don't need an attorney to navigate through the transaction?
It's it's a question or statement that I get every now and then. I can't force anyone to get an attorney, but I remind them of what my job is, what my role is, and I'm very familiar with the process. I've done thousands of closings, and I want to see your transaction succeed. And I don't want you to make a silly mistake just because you think you can, do this on your own and save a little bit of money.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't realize that a real estate attorney it's not an hourly fee. It's a flat fee that you pay at the end. So,
Yep.
Something for somebody who is using an attorney, let's just say through a divorce or some sort of criminal proceeding where you're paying a retainer and you're paying per hour, real estate transactions are very different. It's just one simple flat fee and it's at the end. So the nice thing is you have access to your attorney throughout the transaction, where if you have a question or if you have something where you don't quite understand, you can reach out without that fear of, is that going to cost me 15 minutes of a retainer or an hour of a retainer? Because that's not how it works in real estate. So, looking at the grand scheme of things, having somebody represent you legally and making sure that your documents are online, even just explaining it. One thing that Dan does really well at closing is he literally explains everything that people are signing. And a lot of times people just want to run through it. Tell me where to sign. Yep. Initial. Well, he makes sure that they understand it, breaks it down so it's easy to understand in a way that they actually know what they're signing and what their legal obligations are, especially when it comes to the mortgage and paying back the bank, because they don't mess around. And I know, it's important to highlight that.
And that's exactly right. It is a flat fee. It's kind of lumped into the closing cost that you pay at the end. Okay. And when clients call or when they have questions, they don't have to feel like, is the meter running? Are you just going to keep me on the phone just to bump up your fee? It has nothing to do with that. Whether a client calls me 5 times or 500 times in that span of a contract, whether it's a month or 3 months, the fee is the same. And like you said at the closing, I do spend a lot of time reviewing documents with the client. Can any of the bank documents be changed? No, but clients should walk away from the closing knowing what they just signed and not saying, well, what was that? What did I just do?
Right.
I've gotten looks from other attorneys over the years as if to say, hurry up. Not going to happen. So, plan your schedule accordingly. I mean, on average, closings are about an hour. And I've been to closings where I am the seller attorney and my client has pre-signed documents. So there's really nothing for me to do with the closing, but just sit there and watch the other attorney go through documents with their client. And on some occasions, I've heard the other attorney tell their client, oh, just sign it. Just sign it. This is one of those moments where it says, I'm an attorney, trust me, just go ahead and sign it. It's very shocking that, to hear that. I think people deserve an explanation about documents.
Yeah, because you were mentioning like the difference with attorneys, like when you get a divorce or when different kind of contracts. And this is also a contract. This is a legal contract that you need to be, where you're getting married with the bank, basically, when you do your mortgage. You have a commitment. So it is very important, I think, to understand the language. And so for first-time home buyers, how much, when we are talking about the flat fee and everything, how much is like the range that someone would consider?
I mean, on average, I've seen fees, from 500 to 1,000. As you go more toward the city and downstate, the fees tend to be higher.
Right.
And there are attorneys that will charge. I mean, I've seen $350, $450. But I just caution, clients. You get what you pay for. There's a lot of work that goes into a file. A lot of, call it like behind the scenes work in preparation and review of documents and phone calls with other attorneys, title company, bank, that clients don't see. So if, because clients will sometimes say, well, the attorney across the street can do it for $450. Would you reduce your fee? And I don't, because I do a great job and I work very hard, and I know the amount of time that it takes, to get the job done and get it done right.
And I have 6 kids. I'm just joking.
Right. And they have to eat. Yeah.
One of the things too, I think a lot of people don't realize is that our contracts are very standard. So we all real estate agents use the same contract in the MLS. It's pre-printed. We fill in the blanks. We can add some things, but we are not attorneys. So there's a lot of legal wording and language for some of these like special cases, or just in general, if you're a buyer and you have something that you are requesting from the seller, there are things that, I can suggest and I can write it in there. But an attorney, when we put our contracts together, an attorney has 5 business days, legally 3, but we usually get 5 because especially right now we're so busy, or more sometimes, to review it in order to make it, fully executed. So once it's all signed, and I tell people that all the time, once we all sign this, it still goes to an attorney for the attorney review stage. And when that happens, they can cancel for any reason, they can edit, they can modify, or they can approve. And having you do that right from the get-go is so important. So like Dan said, his attorney approval letter is very detailed. And there's a lot of things that he adds to it that we don't have the option to add because our contracts are standard. So having an attorney who's going to say, hey, what about if there's a raccoon or a squirrel in your attic? What if there's mold? What if there's this and that? This contract does not cover you if these things are there. So I'm going to add that in my attorney approval letter, and we're all going to agree on it. Now that becomes a part of the contract. And it's so important that you have that, right from the get-go, because then as a buyer, you're protected.
Right. And like you said, the attorney approval letter that I send for buyer files is 2 pages. And it's nothing that I call alarming. I call it housekeeping type stuff. So for example, we want to make sure that the appliances at the time of the closing are in working order. What's the last thing that you want to do when you buy a house? Replace an appliance. We want to make sure that the appliances that you saw at the house when you first checked it out are going to be the same ones that you see at the closing. Yes, because I've had files where the sellers will swap out appliances, from the refrigerator that talks to you and tells you to have a good day. They pull that and then they put in, this replacement fridge that, you've seen like 30 years ago. Not the right thing to do. So we have language to avoid that. And even this time of year, regarding snow, if we get hit with a storm, we want language in the contract that you're going to maintain and clear the driveway and the walkway so that on the date of closing and you're moving in, you don't have to shovel like 2 feet of snow. And then you mentioned the inspections. The contract that's used doesn't reference anything about mold, but mold is out there. So if your inspector finds it and it costs more than $1,500 to get rid of it, which it usually does, you have options, to either walk away or ask for a credit. So that attorney approval contingency is probably the most important part about the contract.
Yeah, and then what we do is we make sure that follows throughout the entire process. So, those things that we put into place up front, we make sure at closing we see those same items and that they've been, taken care of, or whatever the case may be. Also for structural, when you go and do your inspections, if there are major issues that are found or minor issues, it's the attorney who is going to request what it is that you want as a buyer to the other side, to make sure that it is made clear what it is that's going to happen. Otherwise, you have the right to cancel, provided it's, a major item of $1,500 or more. If it's septic, radon, well, all of that, but understanding what your options are. I think a lot of buyers have that misconception that if anything shows up in an inspection, the seller has to fix it. That is not the case. Our contract is very clear about what your rights are as a buyer. So understanding that, I think, is extremely important. And, it's usually a courtesy or a request to keep the deal together when we ask for a credit and things like that. Now, a lot of times the agents can pull it together and make that happen, but that's not always the case. So, a lot of times we rely on the attorney to kind of put that wording in and communicate with the other side, because it's just not possible on our side.
Right. And it's all about teamwork. As they say, it sure does make the dream work. When you've got an agent, an attorney, and a lender that work and jive well together, it puts you in a great position for success. One of the things that I really drive home, pardon the pun, with clients is, there's language in the contract regarding a closing date. And I think this paragraph really causes the most frustration for everyone involved, because it does say your closing will be on or before, a certain date. And I remind clients several times that date means next to nothing. Mm-hmm. And because I've been through a lot of them, what I tell clients is this is like a due date for a pregnancy. I love it. The baby will not arrive on the due date, but if everything goes well, it's usually somewhere around that date. But be prepared that, it could go after that. So if you have to give notice to your landlord, don't do it based on the contract closing date, because we want to make sure that you have a place to stay.
Now, in cases when you have a client who is selling and buying at the same time, can you represent the client in those transactions, or do you recommend to get different attorney?
I can, and I do recommend that they have the same attorney because now I am familiar with all the details on the sales side as well as the buy side. So oftentimes, you can't buy until you sell. So if the attorney, for the purchase says, well, what's going on with their other transaction? When do you think it's going to close? Is title in? Are inspections done? I don't have to make a phone call to another attorney. I just know, I pull the file and I can give them all the information. And it's also, when it comes time to close and schedule the closings and figure out all the logistics and the money, it's beneficial that there's one attorney that knows both sides and can handle all that. And that's actually a great point that you bring up, because the question that I ask every buyer client during attorney review is, do you have to sell a property before you buy, or is this contract contingent upon anything? And oftentimes the answer is no, but every once in a while the client will say, well, yeah, I have to sell my house. Oh, does the other side know that? No. So at that point, there's phone calls and letters that go out. We want to make sure that the buyer's covered.
Can we talk about title insurance? This is in the real estate world, one of the questions I get right as we're about to close. Someone will reach out to me, the buyer will say, hey, the attorney mentioned something about title insurance. It's, it seems like it's a little pricey. Do you think it's worth it? Hands down, it is worth it. In my opinion, I've seen so many transactions be delayed or have their own set of issues because the buyer of that home, who's now the seller, never got title insurance. And now they're finding liens from the previous owner, and the new bank will not issue the mortgage because of the fact that there is this lien that was never closed out. And because the seller did not get title insurance, it just takes way longer to try to fix, or it could also become very costly as well. So what are your opinions on title insurance?
Title insurance is crucial. When you're buying a house, you're getting a mortgage, the bank requires that you pay for their title insurance. So a title company, they send a searcher out to the county clerk's office. They do a title search, they check all the records, and then they'll send that search paperwork, let's say to me. I review it, I prepare a report, I send that to the bank. Now that report spells out, are there any open mortgages on the property? Are there any judgments, liens, bankruptcies, things like that? Do we have the proper chain of title? So A sold it to B, B sold it to C, C sold it to D, and so on. We make sure that there's no gap. So, if there's an issue in the future, bank doesn't care because now they've got this title insurance policy that says, we're covered. That policy does nothing to protect the buyer. So at closing, buyers can elect to purchase an owner's policy of title insurance. The rates are set by New York State. We have no control over the premiums. It is based on the loan amount, the purchase price, and the location of the property. In the grand scheme of things, to purchase an owner's policy of title insurance at closing is not a lot of money. It is a one-time fee, so it's not like your car insurance where you pay it every 6 months or so. You pay it once at the closing, and then you're done. So if there's an issue 10 years from now when you sell the house, let's say the searcher missed something, or if there was some kind of fraud, which is difficult to pick up on, that's not going to be your problem. You can say, hello, title company, I've got this policy. And by the way, now you can still proceed with your closing. So some of the files that I have, the sellers don't or didn't get title insurance. There's an issue with title. We've got to clear it. let's say the bank didn't file the paperwork that they were supposed to when the mortgage was paid off. So now it still shows up as being open or record, even though it was paid. That still has to get cleared, and these can take up to a month or more to clear up. And what do buyers and sellers not want in their transaction? They don't want delays.
No.
And something like that is going to make people upset. So if a buyer does not want owner's title insurance, they have to sign a waiver, which is provided by the title company, that says, the title company offered this policy to me, and I'm electing not to get it. That's how important it is, because we don't want someone to call us a year from now and says, well, you never told me about this.
Right.
But it is very important. If anyone asks me about it, I always recommend it.
Absolutely. And I can tell you it's terrible when you pick up a seller and find out that they didn't have title insurance and there's something majorly wrong, and it's not even their fault. So, how do you try and explain it? I understand it was the previous owner, but it carries with the property, and now they're red flagging this. The bank will not issue the loan. So it's definitely, it's a one-time, like, pay it and forget it, and it's that peace of mind. What about the property condition disclosure? So in New York State, the property condition disclosure is a document that the seller can either elect to provide or give a $500 credit. Exempt from that are bank foreclosures and estates. Is there any other exemptions on that, Dan?
There are 11, but the most that I come across are like properties being sold out of a trust or an estate.
Right. So when you are talking to a seller, what do you recommend? Because there are different points of views on this. It's a $500 credit to the buyer. In places like New York City, they don't even use the PCD. They basically just give the credit, but we're dealing with multi-million-dollar properties where $500 is small potatoes compared to what's coming out of the profits and proceeds. You have some of these people around here who are selling $100,000 homes, $200,000 homes, and they're wondering, well, do I want to give the credit of 500 or do I want to fill out the document? In my experience, I've had that property condition disclosure be a positive and be a negative, in the sense that afterwards, the buyer found that something was hidden. And this person had circled, there's never been water in the basement. Well, they were able to find that it was covered up. Well, same situation. The owner only lived there for 5 years. So they answered, has there ever been water in the basement on a 60-year-old home? They answered no. Well, previous owner to them had water in the basement, covered it up. New owner now sees that. And the property condition disclosure is so gray that they ruled in favor of that buyer who sued the seller because there were now damages done. So, the PCD, in my opinion, is very gray, and it's a personal preference whether or not you want to fill it out or not. But again, it's almost like a one-time insurance that if you choose to give the credit to the buyer of $500, it's basically making it so that, you're not saying that straightforward yes or no whether or not something has ever happened if you're not exactly sure whether or not that has happened. What are your thoughts on that, Dan?
I agree. I ask clients, or if clients ask me about the PCDS, if I were to sell my house, I would not fill it out, and I'd give the credit because, of course I would answer the PCD truthfully, but maybe there's something on there that I don't know, and I check no, and then something happens a year from now. Now I'm in a fight with the buyer about whether I knew about something, and I can tell him until I'm blue in the face, I had no idea about this, and now we're in this big fight. Versus, you know what? I don't want to think about this next week, next year, or 2 years from now. Take the credit, and then we're done. And the form itself, as you said, is gray. You can circle unknown on this form for almost every question. But I think the most important thing for buyers to do is not necessarily rely on that statement, but do their home inspections. The home inspector's job is to really rip through the house and point out everything that is wrong or may go wrong and things to watch out for.
Absolutely. And, a lot of buyers will come to me and say, should we be worried that the seller has chose not to include a property condition disclosure? Does that mean they're trying to hide something or anything along those lines? And I tell them, no, it's a one-time insurance and a peace of mind that they're not going to, answer a question that they didn't know. And, it's their own personal choice whether or not they want to include it. Same as you, Dan, I choose to give the credit for the homes that I've had because I've only been there for a short period of time. Or if I flip a home, there's nothing worse than when there's a home that's being flipped and the whole thing is just circled unknown. That's kind of a waste of time anyways. So why not give that credit to say, hey, I don't know enough about the home to answer this, 6-page form. So here's a credit to let you know that I'm choosing to waive that. So, I would, as a buyer, I wouldn't necessarily panic if they're choosing not to include it. If it's an estate or a trust, they really don't know. They have been given this property that they never lived in, they didn't maintain. So to ask them to answer this form would be incredibly unfair. Same with a bank loan. It takes the liability off of the seller. It's not something to be worried about if you're a buyer. So, that's my own personal opinion on that. But before we wrap up, Dan, is there anything else that you want to mention on the legal side of buying or selling a home?
Just friendly reminders. When buying or selling, please use a local real estate attorney. Some of the most challenging transactions that I've had are dealing with non-real estate attorneys on the other side of transactions. So, and then, if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to call 518-465-7581.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. I think this was very informative. Ana, is there anything you want to say in Spanish?
Yeah, in Spanish and also in English, something I want to highlight, it's very important to trust your people, as we say, and go to the professionals, as we could hear today. It's many pieces that we got to put together. And if you are working, taking care of your family, etc., well, what a better way to go with the professionals and handle that. So, for all my Spanish speakers, hablamos el día de hoy acerca de lo que se requiere para la función del abogado en bienes raíces. Yo sé que hablamos mucho en inglés, pero ahí está mi número de teléfono. Llámenme para cualquier situación que quieran saber al respecto. Dan, thank you so much. This was great, and I think we should have you again because there are many questions that came while you were talking.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, we'd love to have you again. And, for everybody who's watching, if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about on any of our shows, please do not hesitate to reach out. We're always available to answer your questions. You can text, you can call, you can email, Facebook Messenger, whatever it is. We are always accessible to you. We really want to make it a goal to educate our consumers and our clients on the process so that it's not as scary and not as overwhelming, because the more that you know and the more that you can absorb in the process, the easier the transaction will be. So we're here. If you have any topics that you want us to talk about, send us a message. We'll be happy to have that and discuss it. If you want to be on our show, also send us a message. We'd love to have you and talk about whatever it is that you may be highlighting in the real estate world. So thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Go out and do great things. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome. Thank you.